Hey, what's up? Hello, I hope you all are doing well. It's hard to believe that we are already halfway through 2021 and this is my quarter two wrap up. I don't know how this happened. Feels like time is irrelevant now, but here we are. Today I want to talk to you about 6 or 7 books that I have read over April, May, and June of this year. So let's just begin. I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about some things. Firstly is Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Maud Montgomery. Many people will know this. It's a piece of Canadian literature that has just been adapted into all kinds of adaptations across time, perhaps most recently Anne with an E on Netflix, if you've seen that. I listened to a sort of a radio play type situation with this book. It wasn't an audiobook, it came in a podcast form. That was produced by Mary Kate Wiles. You might know her from around the internet. And it was absolutely lovely. What like a light, gentle, wonderful story. If you don't know Anne of Green Gables, it's about this orphan girl who goes to live with a brother and sister who are quite aged for the time period. They're in their 60s and they own a farm called Green Gables on Prince Edward Island in Canada, and she gets into all sorts of hilarious misadventures as she grows up. It's light, it's wonderful, it's just a gentle, charming story as she gets into and gets out of all of these scrapes. Really delightful. The show is not like that at all. Anne with an E is much more intense than this book, which I was surprised to find out, although I really do love the series as well. But I really enjoyed reading this, and as Mary Kate, produces more of these radio plays which have different actors reading all of the different voices, and there's music and there's sound effects. It's really lovely. As she produces the rest of these in the series, I'm going to be listening along as well. So I'm listening right now to Anne of Avonlea, and this was just so good. And it's a book that I tried to read in the past and couldn't manage to do it just with text on the page. So if you also have struggled to read this classic, you might enjoy listening to it as well. And I'll put a link down below to where you can listen to that if you want to. Next on the list is An Ordinary Age by Rainsford Stauffer, and I reviewed this book on this channel earlier, so I won't say too much about it, but this is a nonfiction / memoir type of work that discusses millennial culture and how millennials as a generation are under a lot of pressure, and what coming into being a young person, what coming into being your 20s means, and what it means for different subsections of folks who have different life expectations placed on them by society. This was really an interesting book to read. It was very sort of personal to the author. You can hear more about it in my review if you want to, but I was sent that for review and really enjoyed reading it. And I don't have a copy with me right now because I've lent it out to so many people to try out for themselves. So check out that review if you feel so inclined, if that sounds interesting at all to you. Also in April, I read Followers by Megan Angelo. This was a really good but really scary book. I listened to it as an audiobook, and it is about 2 young women in their late 20s in 2016 for most of the book. The book is split into 2016 and 2051. It's a little bit of a dystopian ride, and it follows the lives of these 2 women plus another one who's sort of tangentially related to them in a way. But it really shows how social media and sharing and following has taken over different aspects of our lives, and it's a dystopian look at what happens when it gets so big and turns into something both bigger than government and also perhaps a little bit more insidious than that as well. This is a really interesting book if you are interested in the sociology of social media, of the internet, of online culture, and also just a really well-written story about family. It does deal with some themes of significant mental health issues as well, so I would put that out there before you begin it, but really interesting book. I was teaching a class about social media this semester, and all of my students, most of whom are over 50 years old, were really interested in having a read of this and seeing things from a perspective that is certainly not theirs. So I enjoyed this book. I think I might have given it 3 or 4 stars. I don't quite remember, but the audio was excellent. The production of that text was great. So if you are going to read it, I would lean toward the audio a little bit. And then in late April, early May, I lent my copy of A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas to a friend of mine, and subsequently she got very, very into the series and wanted to talk about it, and I found myself needing to refresh my memory about what happened in the following books. So during this quarter, I also read A Court of Mist and Fury and A Court of Wings and Ruin, and I listened to both of those. I tend to listen to books on my drive to work now. And so I read both of those. I won't go into detail about it. I'm sure there are much better reviews or summaries or just pontifications on BookTube about that series, but they are very, very detailed. It was interesting to hear them out loud. I hadn't previously listened to those books before. I had only read the physical texts, and it was an experience. I have discovered in that I don't necessarily need a different voice for every single character. I do not find it necessary in that series, and there are quite a few characters that happen. So just some thoughts on that. But that's the first 5. I have 2 more. The next, which is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. And this was a new release, I believe, within the last month or so. And it is a little bit similar to Madeline Miller's Circe. It's a beautiful story. It's beautiful and sad. It is Ariadne's Greek mythology story from her perspective about what happened to her, and very closely intertwined with her sister. So it was a little bit of a familial look, and then also sort of like the strength of women, and a lot of commentary about the subjugation of women, particularly in Greek mythology. It was very, very well written. So fascinating, beautiful and sad. I'll say again, much like Madeline Miller's Circe. So if you enjoyed that, I almost guarantee that you will enjoy Ariadne. I would say that it doesn't have quite the intensity that Circe did. It's just maybe a notch below that, but still very good, still very powerful, still very thought-provoking. I think I gave this 4 stars. I might have given it 5 stars. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful book to read. And as someone who has a particular blind spot about Greek mythology, that's not an area of mine that I'm particularly expert in, it was nice to have this explained to me from a different perspective than I normally have heard it in the past. And then lastly, our book club book for June for my library book club was Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia, which, if you are familiar with the highly popular Mexican Gothic, it's the same author. This was lovely. It was such an... I struggle with the word accessible because I don't mean it in the pejorative context that it's normally taken, but this was a really great sort of blending of mythology. Comparative mythology was a term that was used in our group discussion. It was just a lovely ride and a lovely story, and it was not difficult for everyone in the group to get into, and everyone enjoyed it. So I was really pleased to see that. I loved the strength of the main character, Cassiopeia, and I also loved sort of the interplay and the duology of all of the pairs of twins and the gods, and everyone's sort of counterbalancing there. I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to do a full review of this at some point soon, so I'll have more to say on it there. But that was the last book that I read in June. And then right now I'm reading Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which will probably fall into quarter 3, but I'm very excited about this. It's not at all what I expected it to be, and I am fascinated to find out where it is going to go. So if you've read any of these books, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I'd love to chat with you about them, particularly if you've read either Followers or Ariadne. Those were both really intricate stories that I would love to talk more about. As always, thank you so much for watching. You can find out anything that you might want to know about us in the description. I hope you're having lovely weeks and lovely lives, and we will see you very soon.